Good morning. Welcome. Thanks, everyone, for coming this morning. I'm Chris Hill, Director of Sales for WBZ News Radio, and we're really happy to have you guys here this morning and explore the very important topic of getting into college, trade schools, all the building that's going in Boston's great opportunity for these young guys to get into the trades, and the process of getting into college. I know when I first started with my kids in high school, and the FAFSA, the SAT, the ACT, College Board, so it can be daunting. So it's a really, we've got a great panel that's going to help you through all that. So without further ado, we're going to get started. And I'd like to introduce Jeff Brown, our New England business editor and PM Drive news anchor.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. And I can imagine there's going to be no shortage of topics to discuss today. All about, because think about it, I mean, this is really one of the three big investments you're going to make in your life. You got your house, retirement, and a college education. And what most of us should do, obviously, is start saving from the moment the baby takes its first breath. I anticipate I'm going to learn everything that I did wrong today. So I want to introduce our panel and have them all come up to the stage together. And while we do that, I want to welcome and thank our sponsors today, Bloom Shapiro, Endicott College, First Republic Bank, SHP Financial, the New England Carpenters Union, American Student Assistance College Planning Services, and Hello.Boston. One of the things that I go through and I think about all the time is that I'm living this nightmare ×2 right now. I have 2 kids in college, and you get the tuition bills twice a year. And I always tell my wife and anybody who listens, it's like buying 2 cars a year. So if you're not prepared, that's where it's going to be a problem. So we're going to talk about what you need to do, best practices about saving for college, best practices about getting into a college, and then what happens when you get that degree. Where do you go from there? So I'd like to introduce our panel. From my far left is the 5th president of Endicott College, Dr. Richard Wiley. He comes to us after spending some time at UConn, Temple University, and Colorado. From Money Magazine, reporter Caitlin Mulhare. She often writes about financial aid, student debt, and compiles the best colleges list for Money Magazine. The 4th president of North Shore Community College is Dr. Patricia Gentili. She helped launch North Shore Promise, which allows up to 100 students free community college education, and has also established Com University at Lynn, which helps walk students from pre-K right up to the workforce. And the dean at the College of Professional and Continuing Education at Wentworth Institute of Technology is Deborah Wright. She specializes in adult students, adult learners, and works with the Labor Department on apprenticeship programs. So thank you, everybody, for being here. So I think the best place to start would be with you, Caitlin, because the Fidelity survey had recently come out and said that 74%, this sounds good, but I imagine it's really not, 74% of families in Massachusetts are saving for college, but almost half of those families underestimate what the cost of college is. Yeah. We all know we should do this, Caitlin. Why don't we do it better?
Well, it's a great question, $1-million question, right? So I saw the Fidelity study. I've also seen other studies that ask whether you're saving for college, and people say yes, so the majority. And then they ask, okay, great, how much are you saving? And it's like, oh, I don't know, and they have no idea, if anything, which I think is a little bit of human nature, right? Like we all like to say we're working toward a goal, but then when we ask ourselves really specifically, well, where are you along the path to that goal? It's like, oh, maybe not as far as I should be. So it's interesting that people underestimate the cost of college, because we hear so much about those like sky high $60,000 sticker prices that scare some people away from college because they think it's so expensive. So I think the problem lies in like the complete lack of transparency in how much college costs, and that's something that we need a solution on. I don't know where that will come from, whether it's from some state lawmakers or God forbid some federal, some national lawmakers. But I think that could really help to give families a clear idea of, okay, this is what I can expect to pay when my student goes to whether it's a 4-year public college or a 2-year public college or a 4-year private school, because there's wide variation, obviously. So the fact they underestimate is tough. The other tough thing is that it's always changing, so it's not easy to say if you just had I don't know who's in the audience in terms of what ages your children are, but if you just had a baby, who knows what college is going to cost in 18 years, because if you look 18 years ago, it's way higher, and it's been somewhat of an uneven growth. It spiked during the recession with like annual increases of 6% or something. Now it's come down to annual increases in the 2 to 3% range. So it's not an easy answer to figure out how much college.
Right, so are you saying that your strategy should change over time, or that you're just in this spiral that you're never going to ever save
that
enough?
would be depressing. That would be depressing. No, I mean, I think the best thing you could do if you were just had a kid, or you have a young kid and you're looking at college in 15 or 18 years, it's probably safe to assume like at least a 3% annual increase in costs. So if you look at what the costs are now and then sort of forecast that out, I think that's a safe bet. It's obviously not guaranteed, but it's maybe it'll be less. That would be perfect. That would be lovely. But it could be more. But that will at least give you like a concrete number, and you'll be better off for having saved something rather than having no idea basically what you're saving for.
Right. So Pat, from the community college perspective, I mean, what do you see your students doing? I mean, there's obviously the financial aid packages, there's work study, there's scholarships. I mean, are your students taking advantage of all of that? And is there anything more that they should be doing?
Well, at the 15 community colleges across the Commonwealth, we see the lower income, middle income students who really are concerned about affordability. And I have to say, pretty risk averse when it comes to loans. And so taking a look at public higher education, I think, is an important part of affordability of college. A bachelor's degree going through first 2 years in community college and then on to a 4-year public is going to cost you around $30,000, which may be 1 year at another institution. So our students come because they're very concerned about getting an excellent education at an affordable price and then not being burdened with high student loans afterwards. So in the Commonwealth right now, the majority of undergraduates are going to a public higher education institution. And we have 29 of them, 15 community colleges, 9 state colleges, universities, and of course the 5 UMass in the UMass system. So there's a variety of choices in that area. But even at that, we're seeing more students not coming to college. And that's my real concern. In 2015 and 16, we looked at all of the students, there was like 1,100 of them at North Shore Community College who had applied, were accepted, but did not enroll. And quite frankly, I thought that meant they went someplace else, and I kind of wanted to know where they went. So we looked at the National Student Clearinghouse, big data now, where you can track people. And I was shocked that 2 years ago, 50% of those students went nowhere. And last year, 76% of those students who were accepted just didn't go to college. So we had an intern come, make phone calls to all of those folks. Just in 1 year, that's 800 people who didn't go to college, to find out why. Number one, they were worried they could not pay the price. And here at North Shore Community College, it's only $206 a credit. $12,000 total for 2 years of college. But even that cost might as well have been $120,000 to them, because although they feared they would not get enough grants, they also feared they could not pay out of pocket. And the second biggest reason was, I've got to work. I have to put a roof over our heads. I've got to contribute to the family. I might be 35 years old, and I am the breadwinner, and I can't afford to not only pay for the cost of college, but the opportunity cost of not working. So we really have to look at, as the Commonwealth is looking at a major gap in the number of bachelor degrees in 2030. The projection is that we'll be well short of the numbers that we have today. 51% of Massachusetts residents have a bachelor's degree, puts us top in the nation. But the projection is in 10, 20 years, we will not be top in the nation. And so it's people that are not coming to college because they fear the cost that we've really got to reach out to and help them understand how to do it.
You bring up a good point, and Dick, I want to get a little bit on, I don't want to dive into the politics of this, but before we go there, I want to just get this out of the way. You're at Endicott College, right on the waterfront. You have the best view from your office, don't you?
Absolutely.
You do, yeah. Okay, now that we've established that, not to get too political, Washington's talking about a reform of the tax plan, and to Pat's point that, you know, you're concerned about kids, people going to college. How much of that could be a negative impact on your enrollment?
Well, I think everything has some impact. We're filled to capacity. We were one of the 31% of colleges that met their enrollment projections. I think for us and for a lot of places, you've got to go beyond the sticker price and say, how quickly can I get my degree, get into the workforce, and become independent? And to me, as we look at Endicott College, we have a campus in Boston, we have one in Gloucester. Those are, I'll use the word, and I hate the word, no-frill campuses. We don't have a gymnasium, we don't have dining hall, but we're meeting a need in Boston, so, and in Gloucester. The more that we can look at alternatives for students, not just sticker price. We were just ranked by the Wall Street Journal as having the #2 internship program in the country. And I hope I don't offend anybody, but there was a little blog afterwards that said, who would have thought they would have beaten MIT? I love that. But I think part of it gets down as you look at options, but you look at how quickly and how successfully you can enter the workforce and then start making the kind of salaries that you have that choice of making and can make.
All right. So Deborah, let's talk a little bit about you know, comparing trade school to traditional college. Is there an advantage to paying for a trade school? Is it less expensive, more expensive? How's it work out?
I think it works out well for the individual student. And I want to back up and just say, everybody's not the student that's going to go straight from high school into college. I just need to acknowledge that because I work with all the students who don't go that path. And they are the ones who are out there getting the jobs or supporting their families or whatever, and then they want to come back and go to school. So to Pat's point, it is about providing programs that allow for access to education. And that's what I love about what we're able to do at Wentworth, especially through the College of Professional and Continuing Ed. Trade school, I think, is finally meeting higher ed because we found a common language, and that's competency-based learning. And so what we find with Wentworth, especially with some of our programs where people can go through a certificate program in welding or manufacturing or construction management, they can go right to the job site or you know, be in demand for those skills right away. So now that we have this dynamic where we're speaking the same language, I think we're closing that gap, and we're taking some of the stigma off of some of the other methods of getting a job, going into trade, skilled labor. All of those things are kind of colliding as people are looking for ways to really advance their careers, and as they move up in those careers to get those soft skills that do sometimes require that degree. So our challenge is to provide a way to recognize those learning opportunities and apply them toward a degree when those students are actually ready for that bigger commitment.
Of course, before you get the degree, you got to get into a college. And
You do.
we were talking briefly before. There was an article in the New York Times this week about what colleges are looking for in the admission process. Pat, how has that changed over the course of time? Has it changed at a rapid pace? Have you noticed it? Has it evolved slowly?
Well, for community colleges, we're open access, which means we take you where you are and we help you get to the college level. And so we don't turn folks away. It has become more selective in other institutions, and I worry that as there's a search for international students or students outside of the state that can pay more, many of our residents are not able to access those institutions. But you know, there's a lot of strategies that we can use today to reduce the cost of going to college. One of them that I see will be expanding in our state is early college. So if you've got a high school student right now, you need to find out whether or not there are dual enrolled possibilities at your high school with community colleges. For example, in the Lynn Public Schools, we have hundreds of those students, those in the middle, not the very top achievers who we know are going on to college, but those who have academic promise, and maybe first in their family to go to college and not really sure yet whether or not they're academically at where they need to be to go to college. We're doing from age 15 to graduation dual enrollment called early college all across this state, helping to prepare students, helping them get college credits up to 30, 1 year of college, and really seeing themselves as high school students able to go on to college. And these are free. So significantly cutting the cost of college, significantly cutting the time. There's other, you mentioned, what we call prior learning assessment. Just this past year, all 15 community colleges got together for the adult learner coming back to college to say, hey, you probably learned some things. Maybe you were in the military. Maybe your employer sent you to some training. Maybe you acquired some skills in the jobs you've been in. Let us take a look at those and see how they map to college courses and give you credit for that. And so there's a new website just unveiled this fall called massexperiencecounts, all one word, .com, where you can go on and see how many credits you could achieve. Just at North Shore last year, we had about 4,000 credits through PLA, through prior learning assessment, saving folks nearly $2,000 each. So there's strategies to cut the cost for both traditional students coming to college as well as adult learners looking to come back to college. And we have to bring those adult learners back. There's over 600,000 Massachusetts residents right now who went to college for a little while but never completed. And they need to come back and they need to get those post-secondary degrees that are going to be required to stay in the workforce and advance in the workforce.
I just wanted to touch on what she said, because I think that's probably one of the little known secrets is this idea of prior learning assessment. That's where you think as an adult, I've never gone to college, 128 credits is going to take me forever, but you've been in the workplace for the last 20, 25 years. So that is a way for you to come into a college, Wentworth is one of many that offer that, and have a process in which you can assess that learning. And like Pat said, you match it up to learning outcomes. So if you've been in business for yourself for the last 20 years, why on earth would we make you take an intro to business class, right? But we can give you those 3 credits through that prior learning assessment because you have already met those learning outcomes from your real world experience. I don't think enough adults know about those programs, and it could cut up to 45 credits and however many years that would take you to do it off of your degree, saving you time and money. So I definitely want you guys to ask more questions about prior learning assessment.
So, Caitlin, let's talk a little bit about the whole process of getting into college. A lot of colleges have far more applicants than the acceptance. So the onus, I would imagine, is on students to stand out in applying to colleges. How are they doing that these days?
So the New York Times article you brought up, I thought made a really important point that I don't see made enough when you are an applicant to a selective college, which to be clear, like Pat said, the majority of college students attend what, in the industry they call non-selective colleges. So those are either open access or colleges that accept at least half or more of applicants. And the national acceptance rate is 66%. So you hear these crazy stats about how less than 5% of applicants got into Stanford and less than 6% got into Harvard. And people, it's like 10% at some of the really competitive public universities like University of Virginia and University of Michigan. That's true. It is very hard to get into those colleges, but there are a lot of other schools in the country. So that's one point. The other point that was really good about that article is that at those selective colleges, it's a sad reality that the college admissions system is just not always fair. So you may be a really excellent student. You can be top of your class with a strong SAT. Your SAT scores fits in the range. Your GPA fits in the range. You're president of the soccer club and you play an instrument and you work a part-time job. I mean, you are the ideal applicant. But you know what? You're applying to a private school in Massachusetts and you're from Massachusetts and they're really looking for somebody from California. Or their soccer team is full. So you might be a great soccer player, but they need a lacrosse player. That is just, so it's like, it's as an if you're, what we call a traditional college age student, if you're an 18-year-old student and you get that rejection letter, it can be heartbreaking. I remember getting those letters. So I think it's really important to tell students as they're looking at colleges and as they're applying that, a rejection isn't personal. It's just you didn't fit this, kind of. And I would love to hear what you guys, how you guys feel your class. If we can be more, I guess, honest about that with students, is that like colleges are looking to build a well-rounded student body, and so you may not be able to bring what specific qualities they're looking for. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I mean, certainly they're looking for well-rounded students. They're looking for students who can write essays about experiences and show that they have leadership skills and perseverance and grit, that like fun, catchphrase we all hear about now. But they're also looking for somebody who's not, too polished, because I know there are certainly, you've probably heard about people you can pay to like basically help coach you through your essay. And I think college admissions applicants or admissions officers can say like, that's not how like a 17-year-old speaks or talks. So I think the big thing is being authentic, not lying about who you are is important in essays.
There are actually companies that will walk you through this whole process for a fee. But Dick, I mean, from your standpoint, I mean, when you're looking at your applicant pool, from an admissions office standpoint, what stands out from kids?
I think we're unique to the extent that over 85% of our students come in for interviews. It's through the interview process you can separate the heart, the soul, the spirit of a student, whether he's really interested or she's really interested. We don't like just to look at test scores. We don't want to rank people by some artificial means. So we spend a lot of time. An average family would spend 3 hours on the campus with admissions, with the vice president of admissions and financial aid, deans, and so they really understand what we're about. And I think students that take that time, really we get a good match. That's why our retention rate is just under 90%. Because we help students match to their institution. I think we have to look at the cost, and I don't want to lose sight of that in the admissions process. We'll sit down with students and families and tell them, you can't afford it. And because we don't want to have somebody come for a short term.
You'll be that blunt with them?
I'm sorry?
You'll be that blunt?
Yes. Absolutely. I often meet families in the living room of our building. And it's clear if you have that conversation, a parent can say, I can't afford this. There's other places they can go. And I think we have to really start looking at what the options are out there, from the public to the private to the independent to the life experience credits, which we do, and the Boston campus, and all of these things. We spend an awful lot of time debating the cost of education when we should be debating where is the best place for me to go, where can I get the best education that'll lead me to the appropriate career.
That's good.
And just so everybody knows, we will open it up to questions because I know you probably have a lot of them at the conclusion here. But I guess for our college presidents, our dean, some listeners had submitted the question of what happens if my student doesn't have a 3.0 GPA? How much factor does that play? Deborah?
So I want to clarify that the average age of my students in the College of Professional and Continuing Ed is about 38. So a lot of them come to us saying, I don't have a 3.0 GPA, but that was when they were 18 or 19 years old. So I like to think that a lot has changed since then. So I want you to know also that that won't be held against you. What we look at is your experience and your ability to succeed. And most of the time adult students come to us and they have their head down and they think, I was the worst student. I went for 1 year, I partied, I dropped out. But that was 20 years ago. You're a different person now. And so we do want them to come back. We want to do a couple of things. We want to acknowledge who you are today. We want to provide the college for you and the courses in a way that you can go without telling your family, I'm going to go back to school, I'll see you in 4 years, right? So you can work and go to school part-time. You can come to campus. You can do it online. And all of that is designed to make it easier for you as a non-traditional student to get through the education. So those are some of the things I think are important. You can get into a school like Wentworth. We have co-op program that allows you, even for our adult learners, they can take advantage of a co-op program, which sometimes is a great way to get your foot in the door. You may be trying to get an interview at a company and can't get in, but go through and say, you know, I think I want to do a co-op, and you can do a co-op at that same company that you haven't been able to get your foot in the door. So a lot of networking, but the 3.0 will not keep you out of our program.
From a community college perspective, how important is that GPA?
Well, we do multiple measures for traditional students coming in. We look, obviously, at what scores they've had, what their GPA is, but we take every student who comes to North Shore Community College and to the other 14 community colleges. And that's because we really work hard and have all kinds of strategies to help support students, whether it's our average age is 27, so whether it's the 35-year-old who's come back who totally forgot algebra, or the high school senior who really hasn't blossomed yet. We see a lot of students who come to us, okay, and then graduate with a 4.0. I have one who was just our commencement speaker 2 years ago, president of student council, who had gone to Salem High School, and he went back for a recruitment visit, and a teacher got up in the auditorium and said, what happened to you? He was a 1.7 GPA when he was there, but truly a tremendous leader, graduating with a 3.9 and going on to another college. So, we pride ourselves in being open and taking people where they are, helping them get academically prepared, helping them getting into a career pathway that matches what their interest is and their educational goals. We've worked very hard in this particular state to make sure that transfer is seamless to a public four-year. Worked very hard, and that's called mass transfer, very hard on guided pathways. So a student that comes in isn't swirling around taking courses and wasting time and money. They know exactly what they need to be able to get into the career of their choice, to get into a transfer of their choice. And so I think that's why over 200,000 students right now are in a community college, because it's a great place to start, it's a great place to come back, and you get an excellent, affordable education.
Mm-hmm. Dick, when we play the numbers game, I know high school students, seeing it, having lived it, you go through a lot of sleepless nights preparing for the SAT, the ACTs. And they've come under attack. Those tests have come under attack.
Absolutely.
I mean, how much of a measurement do you take on test scores?
Very little.
Yeah.
Most of it is the interview. Most of it is that interaction. As you said, anybody can write an essay for a student. We want students that buy into our philosophy, our approach, that they're going to be successful. Residential campuses are more than just classes. They are opportunities to grow and to mature away from home and do it as an independent individual. So that's the interview, that's the conversations we have. We have 4 major orientations during the fall of the senior year. We meet with all the students and all the parents. It's a special, that to me is how you judge admissions, not from a test score. If test score was the measure, I would have been someplace else. I wouldn't have graduated from college.
I will just add on to that, you know, Dick is in the enviable position of having a much smaller college. So while there has been a lot of criticism about what the SAT and ACT don't measure or how they are not, you know, tied to wealth and other things besides for actual abilities, academic abilities, it is still a cutoff at a lot of, you know, like somewhere like those big public universities. UCLA, I think, has the most applicants of any college in the country, and they have over 50,000 applicants a year. So they're not going to be able to read every one of those essays or every one of those applicants in a holistic way. Is what a lot of private schools say they do, which is looking at that interview and looking at you know, like factors like, oh, this person has a low test score, but they have a high GPA and they worked part-time to support their family. And those are all great things, but at a lot of colleges, unfortunately, the big colleges, that SAT, ACT score is still sort of a way to narrow the pool before they can look at applicants more deeply.
Yeah, I almost forgot to bring this up, and I shouldn't, because it's the bane of almost all parents' existence, the FAFSA.
Yeah.
Form. So I think there's a misconception among parents that, first of all, you need to fill it out. You don't have the option. And then second of all, what impact does that have on financial aid?
So a lot, depending on where you go. Yeah, as you said, fill it out. Anybody who's going to college should fill it out, even if you think you don't want to borrow loans, if you think you're too rich to get aid, it doesn't matter. A lot of colleges use it to award institutional aid, and a lot of states use it to award grants. So even if you know you're not going to get a federal low-income grant, still fill it out. So that's my first rule. Secondly, so the FAFSA, basically, to give you a little bit like a breakdown of quick financial aid terms, which I think I'm guilty of this, and I think most financial aid officers and colleges are guilty of, like, speaking in this financial aid lingo, excuse me, that you know, the average person has never heard before. So you fill out the FAFSA, and what you get back is called your expected family contribution, or your EFC. Which is a little bit of a misnomer, because a lot of parents I hear from, they get that number and they're like, ha, they think I can pay that? What are they, you know, what are they smoking? But still, that's basically what your financial need is what your quote unquote financial need is gonna be determined from. So it's the cost of attendance, which is the tuition and the fees, the room and board, the books, the living expenses, minus that EFC, that expected family contribution, and then you get this financial need as the end number. So that's what the FAFSA tells you at the federal level. And then depending on whether you apply to a private college or a public college, at a public college, that's probably going to be your number. At a private college, a lot of them take another application. So you have another form to fill out called the CSS profile. And that asks more in-depth questions. So the FAFSA really just focuses on your income and your assets and the student's income and assets.
Which one takes like 2 seconds to fill out? Is that I always get confused.
Well, none of them. But the FAFSA has gotten a lot easier. They've made a tool so that you can autofill your information from the IRS, and they have, in the past 5 or 10 years, they've improved the technology. So there's a lot of like skip logic. So if you say that something doesn't apply to you, you're not going to see the next 30 questions about it, basically. There's not that many, but there are in entirety, it's over 100 questions, but most people don't fill out anywhere near that many. And then, so the important things to remember are that your retirement savings are not taken into account. On the FAFSA, your home equity is not taken into account. On the CSS profile, the retirement isn't, but home equity and other things are. So there are multiple ways to kind of get this, like, what your financial need is. And then the most important thing, which is a little depressing to remember, is that just because a college or the federal government tells you that that's your financial need, doesn't mean that the majority of colleges can actually give you money to meet that. So That financial need might be met through loans. It might be met through work study. You know, a lot of places, they give you a financial aid letter, and it's very unclear what is free money, like grants and scholarships, and what is loans that you have to pay back, and which of those loans are parent loans and which are student loans, and they have completely different you know, repayment and interest rates and things like that. So I think the term financial aid is a little misleading because it includes grants, it includes work study, it includes loans, which are 3 totally different things. And then that expected family contribution is a little misleading because a lot of families don't feel they can actually contribute that. And then that financial need is a little misleading because you're not going to get, you know, just because you have need doesn't mean you're going to get aid to fill that gap.
And I just want to add one other thing. Make sure you do this before May 1st.
Yes.
Because May 1st is the state's deadline for their grants. So if you miss that deadline, you're not going to be eligible for state help.
That's an important point because there's a finite pile of money.
Right.
Right? And once
Once
it's
they're
gone,
out,
Earlier the
it's
better.
out.
Yeah.
Very
So do it early.
This is really a puzzle to put together. I don't like puzzles, but trying to bridge that gap, that's mind-numbing.
But you know, there's a lot of places to go for help.
Yeah.
For example, we have a TRIO grant called the Education Opportunity Center, and anybody can walk in with their information and we will help you fill out that FAFSA. You know, the other thing is go to the financial aid people at the college that you're interested in. Sit down with them. They are more than happy to walk you through it, give you the information that you need, help you look at the options and understand them. So you should never not ask for help.
And
Yeah, that's a good point.
Add
The financial
too
aid office.
that parents are getting a lot more savvy themselves, and when their students have applied to multiple colleges, they will show up with the offers, and they will negotiate and say they really want to come here, but this school is offering more money. What can you do? And so that's something that has changed
I
too.
actually
As
did that.
complicated, see?
It worked. It worked. Yeah.
As complicated as it is, those that have figured it out are now reversing the game, and they're coming in saying, yeah, if you really want my daughter, my son to come here, what do you got? Show me the money, right? So don't think you're giving up all your power, because you do have some.
So let's move on just a bit about, I want to talk about trade schools, and I think there used to be a huge stigma about students who didn't go to a traditional college, went to a trade school. Does that stigma still exist?
As I mentioned earlier, that common language, that competency, I think is helping to bridge that. There is not a stigma. As a dean, I have looked at some of the apprenticeship training programs. In fact, I sit on the board with the Massachusetts Advisory Group for apprenticeship programs. And the training that they go through is as detailed and consistent as anything that you would find in curriculum in a college course. So I think the stigma does not need to be there, and I definitely think it's moving away. The other thing is more and more schools like Wentworth are transferring in those experiences either through PLA or through a separate assessment that says, hey, we recognize this apprenticeship program and this training program, and everything that you learn lines up with some of the classes that we would be teaching. I served a couple of years ago with the state apprenticeship program, and we were looking at just that. Some of the attention went to one or the other. Why should we go to a 4-year institution? Why not just go through an apprenticeship or go through a trade school or whatever that program is? And I don't think one is ever going to take over the other. And so having that conversation doesn't seem to be valuable. But playing together, which is what we do at Wentworth, we can work with some of those skilled trades and take those credits, apply them toward the degree. And in fact, some of the partnerships that we have, we come right alongside those apprenticeship programs and offer the academic things that aren't covered through that, so that when the student finishes, they have not only that apprenticeship, but they have an associate degree. So that degree has been designed specifically for that particular trade. Partnerships are great. I think that's a way to bundle education, which is really a big trend now. Certificates, you've heard a lot about MOOCs, where you can sign up and take a free class. Some schools are assessing those and transferring those in. And adults aren't always wanting to go for the long haul now. They want to bundle that. It's like the old adage of how do you eat an elephant, right? Well, sometimes it's one certificate at a time. But at the end of that, they want you to take all their certificates and put it together and give them a degree. And so more and more schools are finding ways to be open to those ideas outside of just the traditional pathway. And all of that leads to your question, which is that's why I think it's less of a stigma now.
Right. I want to come back to your partnership. I know you do some work with a relatively large union in the state. We'll come back to that. But you know, one of the things that you know, you're asking a teenager before they go into college. I think parents are as guilty as anybody of trying to get their teenager to figure out what they want to do with their rest of their life.
Yes.
And so, you know, it costs a lot of money. So you want to get it right when you go in. So you pick the right major, and hopefully you get the degree and you get your dream job. But that's often not the case. One of the disparities we see about kids, Dick, I'll ask you, is that they're often pushed toward the STEM field. And are you finding that to be, I guess, successful with kids? Is that something that they're open to, or are you seeing that?
Well, let me respond also to just the intern or the vocational component too. More and more colleges have picked up the whole notion of the work field. We offer internships, 3 internships in 4 years. So they're getting an apprenticeship because they're working in their fields. Then if they don't like that field, they can move out of it. We'll find students that will enter the STEM field, for example, and say it's too narrow, I want something else. And they can do that because of their, for us, it's their internships. And I think that's really one of our highlights is that. I think the STEM field has a long way to go before it becomes a popular field in higher education. It takes strong mathematics, science, and we really just haven't modified our curriculums in the elementary, middle school, and high school to stimulate what is so critical for the STEM field.
That's a multi-year process.
It's a multi-year process. We spend too much time doing other things, and now here comes my age. George Washington and I were roommates. But we spend too much time talking, you know, about a lot of things in the curriculum that don't need to be there, that we're just piling these things in. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, and science, these have got to come back and come back strong if we're going to have a well-educated force.
Pat, from a community college perspective, I know you get a lot of your qualifying courses done there before you kind of figure out where you're going, but how successful is it to be able to transfer? Because I know not all colleges will accept these pre-qualifying courses.
Right.
Is there a way that you can bridge that gap to get from community to a 4-year?
Well, two things. We have students there for various pathways. About 60% of those who are enrolled in a community college are really looking for career technical education. So our largest major is healthcare, okay? So along one pathway is the nursing pathway, LPN, RN. We have a 3+1 with Salem State for BSN. And then all the technologies, Surg Tech, Med Tech. These are all very popular and highly demanded. Then we have about 40% of our students come with the idea that they want to transfer to a bachelor degree. And so they're there to take their, what we call gen eds, okay? Your general education courses and get your, English Comp 101, same as any other place. About 23% of our students transfer even before they get the associate degree. And they're looking at places where, who's going to take all of my credits, right? Now, mass transfer has been worked out at the Department of Higher Ed level so that if you go to one of the 9 state colleges or one of the 5 UMass systems, all of those college credits in your pathway do transfer in whole. With private institutions, we work out articulation agreements. So for example, we have a number of agreements with Endicott College. We have a number of agreements with many other the places where our students may want to go. But it's on the other end where the decision is made. So it's the receiving college who makes the decision about what they're going to accept. And we don't really have a lot of control over that. We will intercede sometimes by sending the syllabus and what has been involved in that course to the receiving institution. But that's why we try to put our students into a guided pathway where the transfer is going to be seamless.
All right. And so, Deborah, we talked a little bit about your partnership with the union. Tell us about, you partner with the IBEW. Tell us about that.
It's a great program, actually. We come alongside after evaluating the training that they actually go through as part of their partnership, as part of their training, and we look, again, there's that word competencies and outcomes. And we can transfer, so someone who starts coming through the IBEW, let's say they started when they were 18, they come out of that program, they decide at some point, I now want to go to college, I've been doing really well. If they were coming in with just academic credits, they would be starting with 0. But the fact that we can assess what they've already done means that they often can come to us with anywhere from 36, maybe 40-something credits, and what's left of that to get to 60 is what they have to do with Wentworth. And so we've designed a number of those programs where we can come alongside you, and it's not any different than what we would do with a community college. Pat was saying it's up to the school who's on the receiving end to determine what, well, you do all of that up front. You get the curriculum and you look at the pathways and say, based on their course descriptions, these will come right into a 4-year college. So you're not always starting at 0. You're starting at 40 credits or 60 credits. And what we also like to do is we like to take the programs to the students. So often our partnerships will include us offering those last 2 years on site where you've already been going for the last 2 years. Or in some cases with the IBEW on their campus, which is how we originally started. We're not there now, but in Taunton, that's what we do. So I believe access to education means a lot of things, but one of those is being where the students are so that you can make it accessible to them if they're getting off work, or who wants to drive to Boston from Taunton or from Bristol Community College or from North Shore. So not me. So that's I think access to education is bigger than just how we talk about it. So there are a lot of factors that we try to consider, because our audience in the College of Professional and Continuing Ed is the adult students.
Right.
So
our audience has been patient. I want to open it up to questions now. We have several people with microphones. Just raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. Anyone? We've got some up front here, right here. Yes, sir.
My name is David Vera. I work for American Student Assistance. We're located at the Boston Public Library. And we actually do some of the things that you guys are talking about in regards to helping students and families fill out the FAFSA and kind of do a best fit for them going forward through their college experience. What we've kind of noticed going through the process is that, especially dealing with low-income and first-generation families, is that they don't always get the parental support that they need going through this college process. And I know you guys touched upon some of the things that the students can do themselves, but are there more strategies or steps that the students can take themselves to kind of put them in a position to win as they're going through this process?
Well, I'll start. The first thing I think is when you've got a high school student especially, you should be looking at who's got TRIO grants. For example, we have the Education Talent Search, which starts in middle schools, in the public schools, and goes through high school. The whole point of that is to help you prepare for college, Upward Bound, Gear Up. These are all the programs that are paid for with federal dollars to help prepare first-generation, low-income students to find out what college is all about and to help them through the process of applying. So anyone in a high school should really find out what's in that area, and guidance counselors generally know. The other one that I touched upon was early college, and we're all doing it, and the Commonwealth is going to expand the idea of early college, of actually putting high school students into academically rigorous college classes with supports. We have embedded tutors in our college classes for high school students in cohorts so that they're with other high school students, maybe not in their high school, but from other places. And they find out, number one, they can do the work, and number two, that they can begin to see themselves as a college student. But combined with that are the preparation programs of how do you apply for college, what about financial aid, what about financial literacy, what does it mean, what's the total cost of college, not just the tuition and fees. All of those things help prepare the first generation student because they may not have that knowledge in their family. They may not have that knowledge in the community. And so those kinds of supports are essential to making sure that people can see themselves as college students and be prepared for what it's going to take.
All right, next question, right over here.
Hi. Sorry, I'm James Henderson. Hi. Sorry. I actually work in the same office with my colleague David. Having worked in financial aid, I'm sort of curious the panel's take on this. Gainful employment and debt-to-income ratio don't seem to be things that the typical student or the typical parent are really checking out. And there are some colleges and universities, speaking specifically to Endicott, where you have a really strong internship program. Should there not possibly be more emphasis on communicating these touch points?
That's a good question on financial literacy.
I think it's critical. I would pick up on two pieces that have been said. One, I think you do some checking out with the resources available on FAFSA and these others. But go visit a couple of colleges. See whether you fit there. Talk to the admissions and the financial aid office. Try to find out whether this is a match. I use the analogy, picking a college is like buying a good pair of shoes. First of all, it has to look good. Second of all, it has to feel good. And third, it has to last, it has to wear. And I think that can only be done when you go and visit. If you find a college that you really love because it has what you want, then work with that college, work with us, and we'll do everything we possibly can to get you there. To me, that takes it from the paper, from the forms, from other places, and puts it into reality. Some of our best students are students that we would never have accepted, but they had a heart and a spirit, and that made all the difference in the world.
I wanted to just address your questions about the gainful employment, because I think that it's an important concern. Right now, it's been one of my frustrations, but I'm trying to do something that's just the opposite. So we have non-credit bearing certificates that are very popular in our program. The problem with them being non-credit is they don't often transfer then into the degree unless we do some pre-assessment. So if a student comes and they spend 6 months getting a non-credit certificate and they decide, 2 years later they actually want to go back and get a degree, they're almost starting again, except for, again, that pre-assessment piece. So I'm actually moving our non-credit certificates to be credit-bearing, and the gainful employment it's killing me. But what I want to happen through that process is for that student to complete that certificate and for those same 4 or 6 classes to be applicable toward the next degree. And you'll see that happening a lot. It's scaffolding that education. If you remember, I talked about eating that elephant. That's one of the ways that we're trying to structure our curriculums so that I can recognize every chunk that you take toward a bigger goal, which ultimately would be that degree. So it's there for a reason, but sometimes it's a little daunting for people.
And I'd just like to add, the gainful employment really came about because of the concerns over the for-profits.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people don't understand what's the difference between a for-profit, a private, public, what does that mean? So I think asking the questions to a college. What are you? How are you structured? Are you a private, nonprofit institution? Are you a private, for-profit institution? I'll give you one example. When ITT closed their North Boston and South Boston campuses, we reached out right away to the students to find out how we can help them, and looked at the database of who was there, and were really surprised, for example, of how many Lynn residents, where we have a campus, were actually enrolled at ITT, taking courses and programs that we also offered, but at like 4 times the cost. And I really believe it's a lack of understanding and about what the sector is, how is it different, what does it mean? Gainful employment was really meant to take a look at those career programs that were offered through the for-profit areas to see what kind of placements they had, so people had more knowledge to be able to make their choices.
I was just going to quickly add, though, I think beyond gainful employment and debt to income ratio, there's like the college scorecard, there's a ton of data out there. And unfortunately, to your point, a lot of people don't know it exists and don't know how to use it. So the onus, I think, is on me, on people like me, on people like colleges to probably better display that data and to help people make sense of it. Because a lot of states now have systems where they can track precisely which college degree led to which career and how much money they made. And that is such valuable information for a student who's wondering, like, is it worth it to borrow $30,000 for this program? Well, sure, I'm gonna graduate and probably make $60,000 and I can pay that off. Or nobody graduates from this school and the average salary is $20,000. There's still a lot of work to be done in getting that, the data exists now, but in getting that into the hands of people making the decisions about where to enroll.
Yeah, we publish a fact book which lists all the facts of the college, the cost of programs, what the employment percentage is, what the salary is, so that anybody that comes onto our campus, whether it be in interior architecture, nursing, business, they can look and see what the last 3 classes have made upon graduation. And then they can compare that to the value or the cost of the education. To me, I get a little worried a lot when we talk about cost without really being concerned with the value. How much value is there? Is it worth the time? Is it worth the energy? Is it worth the investment? Most everybody in this room probably had loans. They were disproportionate to the way they are today, but we paid them off. We have a default rate on the Pell of less than 2%, which says that our students are borrowing the money and paying it back. That's a great measure of success.
All right. Other questions? Up in the back.
My question is, earlier on you said that it's a great thing to start saving when you have your kids, which we did. But the problem is now that the kids are in high school and getting ready to go to college, we're hearing that the 529 plans are going to work against them getting like grants and financial aids and loans. Is that true?
Yeah, I can answer that. It is partially true, though somewhat misleading. So the 529 accounts are assessed on the FAFSA as a parent asset. So that means 5.6% of however much you have saved will be, like taken and counted as money you can give towards. So it could reduce the amount of aid that is offered to you, but by 5.6%, which is still a lot better off than you would have been had you not started saving. So
I'd like to just let you know of a problem I ran into. My daughter had her first child, and she said, "Dad, don't give money, start a 529 plan." Great idea, my dear. I now have 8 grandchildren and 8 of these plans, and nothing is making them grow while I'm dividing everything.
And therein lies a problem, right?
Therein lies the problem.
got that compound interest working for you.
Got to be a better way. All right, anybody else? Right there in the middle.
Yes, hi. I just had a question if you could elaborate on some out-of-state reciprocity programs that Massachusetts might have. I know there's one with UMaine, and I want to know about other, I'll say, regional colleges or regional states, and what are some of the requirements that might be needed to be successful in those programs, I guess.
Hearing a lot about that these days, especially with the Maine connection.
Yes.
So thoughts on that? I mean, is that something that's here to stay? Are we going to expand that? How's that going to work?
Well, clearly, when you bring in an out-of-state student or an out-of-country student, the old model was you actually made more money because they were charged more. The Massachusetts Board of Higher Ed has some policy around that, and we don't have much choice in the public sector. We have to follow the policy. But there is a lot more competition now. For example, Maine, who is saying, you know, even if you're an out-of-state resident and you come here, you'll pay in-state tuition and fees. And so there's a lot of discussion about what that means and how we compete in that area. Now, for a community college, most of our students, for us it's 99%, are local residents, okay? And so we don't, as long as you can show residency for 6 months, you are counted as in-state. And the tuition is the in-state lower cost. But I'd love to hear what some of the, you know, to me it's about increased competition for a smaller pool of students, especially those graduating from high school, because the demographics show us until the end of the 2020s, there's going to be fewer and fewer 18-year-olds graduating from high school because there just aren't that many. And so how do you meet your enrollment goals? You know, we've seen in the community college sector a decline since the height of the Great Recession in 2010, about a 20% decline in enrollment. And that really is based on folks going back to work and not having the time to come to college. But I think you bring up a great question, because the amount of competition for students is difficult for the colleges and the institutions, but good for the students who now maybe have better packages and more affordable options, even out of state.
And it's good for colleges like Wentworth, who have, adults are the fastest growing population in higher ed right now. So when you have a college that has a section that's dedicated just to that non-traditional student, the bad side of that is a lot of pressure on our college to kind of meet the difference in those students. So it's good and bad.
One population we haven't talked about are the returning veterans.
Yes.
Here is a large group of people that are coming back, and they're not taking advantage of the various financial support they can get to go to college. Yes, there's the Yellow Ribbon program where we'll match what the cost of the grant. But I think that there's a lot more that we need to do. We just can't wait for the veterans to come to us. We've moved on to military bases, and we're offering courses on the military bases where many of these returning veterans really have found a home upon their return. In fact, we put a professor on a U.S. Coast Guard cutter as it went from Nova Scotia down to Florida. And the professor taught there. He called me one night and he said, "They're all laughing. What's going to happen to me?" And I said, "I have no idea." "Well, when you cross the equator for the first time, they throw you in." And he called me and he said, "Did you know about that?" And I said, "Sort of." But I think that's a population that is different than what we're talking about, but is critical to the future of this country.
You know, Dick, I'm glad you brought that up. You can check out whether a college is military friendly on their websites. For us at North Shore, about 5% of our student population is veterans. And in order to support them, we bring veteran administration benefits and support services onto the campus. And I got to tell you, for that group of students, and I think you're right, it's a very different population. I can go, you know, everybody else is gone. when the semester ends, but those veterans are still in our Veteran Center, supporting each other and helping each other, not only make sure that they are getting the benefits they deserve, but the support that they need to retain in college. And I think you're right, as more of our veterans come back and access their benefits, we're going to see that more colleges will have to rise to the occasion and provide the kinds of support to help veterans who are suffering from PTSD, who may have some disabilities as a result of their service, and are reacclimating back to civilian life.
Right.
I'm glad that you used the phrase that more colleges will have to rise to the occasion, because I think the sad part is if you just see that group as a way to increase enrollment without preparing to do something different to meet their needs, then that's when it's really sad. But when you can look at what do we need to do for this population as we recruit them, as they come back and select our college, that's when you have an opportunity to really be creative with the opportunities that you can provide in terms of having a center where they can go, having one-stop shopping so that they don't have to run all over campus and try to learn this on the fly, having somebody dedicated in your financial aid office who can speak just to the veterans and how to access their benefits. Really, those little things become so important, and I think schools need to be willing to step up and do those extra things.
You know, one thing that I think we've got to also look at, it, and I touched on it, is the fact that colleges are all very different, but yet they're all similar. There are certain kinds of programs that are sort of hidden away and people don't know about it. We have a program for single mothers. They can live on campus for a year, for 4 years. We provide childcare. They become part of our community. This is a forgotten population who very often have no place to go because they've got a child and nobody else to take care of the child. The second piece is we opened a Boston campus because many people are frightened or nervous or concerned about going to bigger universities. They really want to cut back and they want to be in more of a family environment. And that's what we have in our Boston campus, a lot of personal attention. These are the people that won't go to college, or if they do, as soon as they hit a roadblock, they stop. So it's a variety of things that we need to look at within all these institutions.
And I want to point out that the tax plan that was put out yesterday includes doing away with the child care supports that college students have. And so we've got to be on our guard to protect some of the supports that our students need. At North Shore, 28% of our students are single parents. Over 60% are supporting some dependents. So without those kinds of supports, all of a sudden the cost to go to college is way higher because now I've got to pay for childcare as well and not have the supports I need to be able to get back into college or go to college to become self-supporting down the line.
Everybody wants money. That's what makes saving so hard. All right, so we probably have time for one more question, and right in the middle.
Thank you very much. Asher Nichols, my colleague, and I, George, own a small residential remodeling company. And so I'm coming at this from the trade crisis that we're going through right now and have been for the last, 5, 6 years. There's a building boom, and there aren't enough people coming into the trades working every day, helping to build the things that we all need. And so I wonder, just want to say that I'm working with organizations like This Old House and Mike Rowe Works, NARI, which is an organization that we're a part of. Also, Newton North High School has a VOC program. I want everyone to be aware of that, but also I'm curious on how we might be able to dovetail, because I'm hearing everything you're saying and I think it's fantastic, but there are kids that can go directly into the trades, benefit from that for the rest of their life, as I did, go on to some sort of higher education program, and then either come back into the workforce as educated workforce, or maybe they decide college isn't right for them at all. And so from the two of us, George and I, curious, how can we partner with you? What are your thoughts about that?
great question and a great opportunity. Through our new program development, and the director of that is actually here, Liam Tron, that's how we started initially building these programs. And I always go back to what you don't know what you don't know. And before I started at Wentworth, I had no idea of the opportunities that existed through some of the trades and what they would pay for and what they wouldn't. So as we started going out building these partnerships, we have agreed to be on the front end with those institutions as they're recruiting the students. Let's face it, everybody here wants their kid to go to college. Rather than forcing them to make that decision, what if you could do both? And we partner so that the parent can see not only can they go into this trade organization, but they're affiliated with Wentworth Institute of Technology, and they're also going to come out of it with an associate degree. Then they can go off and work for a couple of years, and as they get promoted up to project managers, and they say, you know what, I really need to go back and get that bachelor's degree, we're still here. So allowing us to partner with you on the front end helps us to tell a more holistic story. And I know Elizabeth is here. Women in the trades, huge need, right?
Great.
So, but the average parent does not know this. If you went to a high school and asked some of the females what they want to do, they are not going to say, I want to be in construction management or electrician. They don't realize that it's not just the one thing that they may see, which is swinging a hammer. There's so many different opportunities in those fields. So we are willing to go on the front end to help you recruit those students by telling the story and by increasing the offering of not just being that trade, but also satisfying the need for the parent of having that degree on the back end of it as well.
And I have to say that all 15 community colleges in this Commonwealth partner with K through 12 school districts and VOTEX. And so, for example, at North Shore, we partner very closely with Lynn Vocational Technical School, and we partner very closely at our Danvers campus with our next door neighbor, Essex Tech. And early college is another way to do that. So working with the students who are going through trade education at the high school level, so at the same time they can also complete their English comp, their speech courses, so they can communicate, so they're ready to not only enter the field, but advance in the field, own their own business, understand a little bit more about finance and other things. I think that's really important. And I think going to college while you're going through trade skill training as well also sort of raises the prestige of that industry. And so more parents, I believe, would be more willing to see their children go into those fields when you have these kinds of collaborations.
See, I knew that we were going to have a lot of topics left over and not a lot of time, but I do want to thank everybody for being here today. And before we wrap up, I wanted to thank our sponsors once again: Bloom Shapiro, Endicott College, First Republic Bank, SHP Financial, the New England Carpenters Union, American Student Assistance College Planning Services, and Hello.Boston. A big thank you to our panel, Dr. Dick Wiley from Endicott.
Thank you.
Caitlin Mulhare, a reporter with Money Magazine. Patricia Gentili from North Shore Community College. And from the Wentworth Institute of Technology, Deborah Knight. I'm Jeff Brown. I want to thank you all for listening and for being here today. Till next time, thank you.